What am I doing? I'm talking to an empty telephone.
I don't understand.
Because there was a dead man on the other end of this fucking line.
Planet of the Apes trilogy. Rise of the Planet of the Apes. Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. War for the Planet of the Apes. Welcome to Corona Cinema. I'm Liam Waite, and I'm joined as always by Ross.
Hello.
Matty.
Good afternoon.
And Mason Richard Carr.
You alright?
And we're going to start with Rise of the Planet of the Apes from 2011. A substance designed to help the brain repair itself gives advanced intelligence to a chimpanzee who leads an ape uprising. Directed by Rupert Wyatt and co-written by Rick Jaffa and Amanda Silver. Starring Andy Serkis, James Franco, Frida Pinto, and John Lithgow. It's Oscar nominated for its visual effects only. And I don't know whose pick this was, so I'm just going to mute myself and see who starts talking.
I chose this film because, to be fair, I chose to watch this trilogy because I remember watching all of them in the cinema as they came out, but I chose Rise because that was one, obviously, that initially sparked my interest in the trilogy. I think it's probably one of my favourite modern day trilogies, to be honest. I think all three of the films are solid. It doesn't seem to sort of dip in quality as they go along. I think they get slightly better with each one. I think for a film that sort of lays the foundations, it does that sort of perfectly for this trilogy. And I also think that it's probably one of the strongest standalones out of the three. Out of the three films for this week. I think it's the one that you can kind of just watch, and if you didn't want to, you wouldn't have to watch the others after that. I think it's a really accessible film as well, and it's quite easy to follow, considering it's quite a simple storyline, to be honest, where you have James Franco's dad who has Alzheimer's, and he's trying to find a cure for it, and you can see why he has such sort of a passion and a desire to find that cure. Other than that, I think the film it's a really strong film on its own, and it introduces a trilogy of a reboot really well. There's a few things that I don't think make sense in the film, like the way that James Franco has Caesar at home for so many years, and then when Caesar gets sent to the ape sanctuary or wherever it is, he has no disciplinary action at work. There's no comment on it, no nothing. Surely that'd be headline news if some ape bit of someone's finger on some street in America. So I think the film sort of brushes past a few things a bit too much, and I feel like as well, the workers at the ape sanctuary, I feel like they're kind of just evil for the purpose of being evil, and just to give a villain, an extra villain in the film. I feel like there's kind of no reason for them to be arseholes. They're kind of just placed there for us to dislike them. So I feel like the film has its weaknesses, but all in all, yeah, it's a really strong film.
Yeah, Malfoy just seems like he has a killing boner for apes as you say, there's just no reason. It's just really forced. It's you've got to have these guys who for some reason decide to work in an ape sanctuary but hate apes and enjoy having a power trip over them, to the point where he's that bit towards the end when he gets beaten up, he still comes back for more and tries to go after them. So at that point you're okay, they're very advanced and they're probably going to take me out, so I probably should just stay away. But yeah, I disagree that it's a good standalone. I feel like it's more of an introduction into the trilogy, and because you kind of touched on it, there's not an awful lot that happens. It's only an hour and a half basically, and at points it does feel a little bit compressed and not entirely complete. But it's still my favorite out of the trilogy. I don't think it's the best one, but I think it's my favorite because it is just an easier, lighter watch. But I think it's kind of more of an introduction into the trilogy than existing as a standalone. Ross, is that something you'd agree with?
Yeah, I definitely don't think it's the best one, but it kind of is just there to introduce Caesar and who he is and what this medicine, whatever it is, and that kind of stuff. And it's kind of there to introduce that, but it does it effectively, I think. So it works well as a standalone because I don't think you could probably watch the other two as a standalone, but you might not really get what's going on, like why this pandemic's about, that kind of stuff. Yeah, but I think there's a few bits that I'm not sure about with this film. As you said about Draco, he just kind of bullies the apes for the like. I don't think you would be working in an ape sanctuary if you didn't like apes. So I find that a bit weird. And I think at the end when they do cross the bridge, obviously they kill all the people, but surely by this point, like a whole army would be on them stopping them, not just like the 10, 20 policemen that were at the bridge. And yeah, it's kind of left to be in the woods afterwards. So that's what I do think is a bit wrong with the film, and they kind of brush over. But no, as you say, it's a good standalone, a good film still. It's not my favorite, and I don't think it's the best one, but it's still a quality film, and it's a good setup for the rest of the trilogy, and it's necessary and it needs to be there.
Yeah, I didn't think about that actually. Like, especially in America, like when the apes just go into the forest or the woods, whatever, like America be like, okay, let's nuke them. Let's nuke that whole woods, just take them out, make sure they're completely vaporized. Like that's just what would happen because we don't know what happens in that period between Rise and Dawn. I think it's 10 years, isn't it? We don't know what's like in the immediate aftermath to this ape attack, what's happening, like how quickly is the virus going to spread and stuff. So you would think there'd be like a response to the apes after what they did on the bridge. Yeah, I don't really think about that. But I think the movie really gets good when Caesar becomes like the main character, because ultimately this trilogy is kind of like following his journey mainly. I think the movie is at its best when it's like centered on him, when he becomes a star, like his like journey to becoming like from adapting from being like a house pet kind of thing into becoming like the leader of the apes. Matt, is that something you think like the film really goes into his comes into his own when Caesar becomes the main character and not as much of James Franco?
Yeah, I think when Caesar really starts to like express himself and kind of like has like an idea of self throughout the film, it becomes really strong, because that's basically what this film wants to set up this character, because more or less everyone else doesn't really get carried on into the other films. Only Apes really get like perpetuated through this, and this whole 3-film trilogy is like an arc just for Caesar. So it does start to pick up when you see him start to understand things and then kind of like question his own norm. I think the first time that he does it is when they're going for a walk in the redwoods and he sees another dog, or he sees another sort of pet with a collar on, a German Shepherd, and he starts to kind of question, what am I? He hasn't seen anyone else like himself. I don't think he'd ever taken him to the zoo or anything. He'd never been to the labs. So then he starts to kind of like question. You see that kind of higher thinking really start to develop, and it's just really nice to see in a believable way how Apes went from just being apes to being quite scary, because the whole premise of these films is kind of terrifying, because even a baby chimp is easily stronger than a full-grown man, and it's kind of terrifying. If one of these, you're in a fight, one of these, it'd rip your fucking head off. I don't want to go into too much of like Joe Rogan talks about chimps, and they're brutal. Like there was a cameraman with the BBC, and chimps know what you like, because they are, even just normal chimps, they know you like your fingers, your eyes, and your genitals. And there was a documentary where he just ripped someone's genitals off because he knew that's what he would like. He wanted to keep his genitals, obviously. So like apes are quite scary, and to have this captured in a film, and I think in a way, once you put these 3 films together, it captures it far more successfully than the old films ever did. Now that the CGI is catching up, I think in the first film the CGI is okay and it does well, but then when you compare it what they build onto on the second and third films, it is bloody ridiculous, and it even makes even the first film look dated. Like the leaps and bounds that they've done with these films, that these films managed to accumulate the budget that they did. It's really quite mesmerizing. The work obviously that Andy Serkis has done with the motion capture, like the fact that he hasn't got any recognition in terms of like awards. Like I suppose that there isn't really a way for him to get anything at the Oscars, like him personally. But like I think there's been controversies about this before, about like voice actors, like Scarlett Johansson and her not getting any nods just because it's her voice. And I think Andy Serkis should be getting nods at the Academy Awards for the things he is doing. The other things I just want to say about this film is also, it's probably like the purest of the films. Like as Ross said, like it would work really well as a standalone film. But I'm so glad they carried it on, because I think even though it works well, it would be weak because it doesn't explain the link on how it would get to the old films, the old Planet of the Apes films. Kind of doesn't explain how, yeah, they'd probably just get chased into the woods and then all shot, and then that'd be kind of it. There would be a retaliation action. So it's nice that then the simian flu kind of explains everything. You have that 10-year gap between this and the next one, and you can see how with each film it gets more and more believable that these apes could kind of like take over the world given the right kind of circumstances. And James Franco as well. Like he's a funny actor because like he's been in very silly films, and he's not often taken very seriously. Obviously, he made like Jumps with like 127 Hours, where that's like a very good standout film. But even like Disaster Artist, you can't quite take him too seriously. But in this film, really, there is nothing to have a go at. Like he fills the role perfectly. It may not be the best performance of the trilogy, but it works really well. And then probably the last thing I want to say about this film is the premises it sets up, that it carries on throughout the three films. You can see that these films were shot with the intention of doing a trilogy. Like the first premise of Caesar asking for permission from James Franco, and then using that sign, and then that being used throughout the next films. We'll talk about it later, but that's a premise that they hound in very quickly when it doesn't seem that important. And in the second film especially, you see how important that is. And the second premise is apes together strong. That really comes in on the third film. And it's just these little kind of like principles that they set up when the plot is still in like its little sapling stage, really gives the whole trilogy its strength. And yeah, I mean, there's lots of nitty bits you can get into this film. There's some bits I don't quite like, and some bits they could have done better. But for like a first go at it, I think they did remarkably well.
My other thought on the film is that when I remember at the time in the second film when James Franco wasn't in it at all, I remember feeling like I was like, oh, that's so shit. He needs to be in this, blah, 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 blah. But going back and watching the first one again, his presence really doesn't feel that important anymore. Like, I think as you watch the second and the third one, he seems quite insignificant to me, especially even in terms of the storyline or anything like that. Like they give a nod to it in the second one when they go back to the house and stuff like that. But it's kind of like what you said, when the film is focused on Caesar and his progression, that's when it's its strongest. So that's probably one thing that I picked up the most rewatching the first film, was how much I didn't need James Franco in the next two films after.
I would say like a strength of these films is, even though James Franco is important in this film, and they do have a lead kind of like, or a co-star in every film for Caesar is like the main plot driver of the film. And in the first film, he is kind of like just kind of being dragged along for the ride, but then he starts to make his own decisions. So it is quite powerful that Caesar is the main character of these films. And that's kind of shown. It's not like he isn't like being used or just like dragged along by other characters. So it's nice that we have the main focal point of this film is Caesar, and that carries on through, rather than having, I don't know, it's hard to think of any other examples, but there are films where they say someone is like the main point of this film, but they keep having to like rely on other characters for the reason they're doing things.
Okay, let's get some ratings. I'll start with you, Mason.
I gave it a 7.8.
Ross?
I'll give it a 7.4.
Matty?
I'll match Mason, give it a 7.8.
I'll give it a 7.5. Moving on to Dawn of the Planet of the Apes from 2014. A growing nation of genetically evolved apes, led by Caesar, is threatened by a band of human survivors of the devastating virus unleashed a decade earlier. Directed by Matt Reeves, a new director, and co-written by Jaffa Silver and Mark Bombach. Starring Circus, Jason Clarke, Kerry Russell, and Gary Oldman. Again, nominated for visual effects. Whoever picked this? Speak now, or forever hold your peace.
So I was the only one who hadn't seen any of the film this week, and I kind of just got left with this one. but I'm glad I did. It was probably like one of the best ones, and maybe War is a bit better. Like this and War are definitely the strongest ones. I think being a favorite film, being the best film is two different things. So yeah, I mean, but yeah, that they start showing the pandemic and the people dying and stuff. It just kind of seemed too close to real life. So that was kind of sad. But Caesar was I think straight away in this film you realize he's evolved. He's scarier in this film. He knows his shit straight away. Like it says it's 10 years later as well. So it makes sense. You don't really need to. You're fine with the way he's evolved. But yeah, he's just a leader who wants humans and apes to both be at peace. And I think straight off from this film, it's got like a whole different tone to the other films. And there's just like way more characters to keep track of. Not in a bad way. Like it doesn't get confusing in any way. But yeah, and I think what this film does well is it's got that dick at the start who brings a gun with him to see the apes, and the film leads you to think that he's going to be the antagonist, but it kind of had this gradual switch into actually being Cobra. And it's smart how it does that, because I think it leads you to think, oh, the humans are stupid, they've caused this, which they kind of did. Because to be honest, I don't 100% blame Cobra for being pissed off, because he obviously went to see the guns. They were all there. I'll be pretty pissed off if I was him as well. But yeah, then because at first I was agreeing with him, then he shot Caesar, and I was like, yeah, he's a prick. And yeah, like yeah, just throwing Ash off the edge and stuff, and it's just so sad and makes you hate Cobra. And I think actually Cobra's like one of the movie villains that no one really talks about, but should be. He's up there, I think. Yeah, it's definitely way sadder seeing the animals dying as humans die in any film, which is obviously sad. But no, I think it's a good like kind of gradual process into what Cobra did happening, and then more swarming the base. But you also get this kind of side story with Caesar, who's still alive, etc. And what I think they did really nicely in this film was kind of giving resolution to James Franco's character. Obviously, them going to James Franco's house, then watching the tape and stuff, and you see Caesar getting emotional about it. And I think it gives a good resolution as to why James Franco isn't in this film. And as Mason said earlier, he just doesn't really seem important to the story anymore. But so they didn't need to include him, and then I'm glad they didn't force him into the film, but also gave him this kind of resolution. I think they did that really well. But yeah, it's a really good film, I think, and I like the ending because it's kind of Caesar. He says Cobra is not an ape, and yeah, it's a good round off to the film, kind of setting up for war, and it makes you want to watch it, and it makes you want to jump into that third film. And I think in this film probably has like the best like set design, like that burnt down city just looks really cool, I think, and obviously the CGI is like impressive more in this film, I think, as well.
Yeah, I think everything about the next two films just goes up like quite a number of levels on the first one. I don't know why they changed director, whether it was because they wanted to go with a different style, and whether they weren't too impressed with the first guy, or whether it was just some other reason. But I think it paid off. I think they're just more. This guy, I haven't seen any of his other films, but to see is more accomplished both of these next two films. And like as Ross says, like the production design and all the visuals, they're just far better. A few years in advance, and you see all those years shown on screen. Like the level of expression you're able to get on these apes' faces with the CGI in this one, and then subsequently in War, it's just pretty like phenomenal, both from a like visual effects perspective and from an actual like literally they're actually acted. Like I mean, you kind of have to respect like people like Andy Serkis and other motion capture people, like their craft, like they actually are like very highly trained, highly skilled actors. And I think the biggest thing I enjoy about this film is like that kind of simmering tension between Caesar and Cobra and like their conflicting ideologies and how that kind of plays out. And that's all just bubbling under the surface for a while in the film. And then obviously you have the moment when Cobra actually shoots Caesar, and then it's like, oh, when is Caesar going to come back? How's that going to be resolved, whilst having the stuff with the humans as well on the side. And my favorite scene in all three movies, like Cobra's, I really like, not respect, I don't know what the word is. I really enjoy Cobra as a character, even though he's a despicable bad ape, but he's a very fascinating character. My favorite scene in all the movies is him when, obviously it's like kind of split with two scenes, when he first encounters the guards and he has to pretend that he's a bit of like a simpleton, so he can seem like he's just this innocent dumb ape, so they don't take him seriously and think he's a threat. So you have that one scene where he shows that, and then he comes back again and does the same kind of routine. It's like, oh, look at me, I'm gonna sit here and next to you and pretend I'm all jolly and everything like that, and then grabs the gun and takes them out. That shows like a level of intelligence that's just pretty wild from a character like him. For someone that obviously he's evil, but that's pretty impressive how he knows how to like emotionally manipulate these two guys. But Matty, is Cobra another character for you that you can, I don't know, Ross mentioned he was kind of on board with him before he killed Caesar. Do you have any similar feelings toward this ape?
Cobra is probably one of the most interesting characters kind of throughout these films. Even like he's so interesting that his presence stays with us in the third film, even though he's not there anymore. And the thing that really steps this film up is the fact that it takes, in the first film, all the apes are united against one purpose: get free of the humans. That's it. There's no real then struggle between the apes, other than just Caesar just trying to like get in charge of everyone so he can kind of take control, just so he can coordinate the apes. Now they've been kind of like procreating for 10 years, they've made up their base, they're happy, and this is when the difference in opinions comes back, when the humans re-emerge to them because they thought they were all dead. And the conflict between Caesar and Cobra is a really strong focal point throughout this film, trying to understand who's right. People say, well, I think you've labeled Cobra as just a bad ape, but I don't think that's particularly true, because like if you think about, Cobra is older than Caesar, and he's just been brutalized for like longer than 10 years, just in labs over and over and over again, and he hates humans. And you got to say, he thinks that what humans just want to wipe apes out. Like, he's not wrong, is he? I think there's pretty much only one or two humans, like, or maybe three, like in this film, that actually don't want to kill all the apes. And then pretty much all of them, even if they're not partial to it, if it's us or them, they'll kill the apes. And that is what Cobra's afraid of, and that damn near happens. And I think the only thing that is a shame is like Cobra doesn't really kind of get to do all of it in one go. And then obviously one of my favorite scenes from the whole film is how militant Cobra gets, to the point he kills Rocket's son. And that's when you realize Cobra is just too far gone in his extremes. But he understands that he needs to have everyone following him. Otherwise it doesn't work, because it's the same principle, apes together strong. So he can't have Caesar and Ash and Rocket and Maurice overriding what he's trying to do. And it kind of like ties in with like Blue Eyes, Caesar's son. He's kind of, I wish he had more of a voice. Well, yeah, because he doesn't even talk in the whole film, but like he really is just a passive observer all the way through. And he just doesn't really do anything. And it is a shame, but it's kind of like he is an important focal point for the story as well, in kind of like Caesar trying to guide his son, and Blue Eyes really is stuck between Cobra and Caesar. And I think probably one of the favorite things about this film that it brings forward is Caesar's kind of ignorance, because he comes from the first film still believing all apes are good. He doesn't believe all humans are evil, but he knows that some of them are evil, and they will kind of self-serve themselves. But apes are good, because he is an ape, and apes are all good. And coming to the realization at the end of this film that Cobra just cannot escape his own hate is quite like a revelation for Caesar, and it kind of makes him a bit more callous, and kind of explains more of the character that we see in the last film. And then probably the highlight of the film, where he has to kill Cobra, is a really important point for Caesar, because he's taken one of the founding laws of their society, that ape does not kill ape, and he has to break that, because he realizes how dangerous Cobra is to not just like their survival, but everyone's survival. It just ruins the balance between humans and apes, if there could ever be one. It just seems too fragile at the moment. And it's really, really powerful stuff. And for a long time, this was my favorite of the three films. Just kind of like, just watching the apes just become kind of organized is kind of scary. And that some of the cinematography as well, of the apes riding in with like double machine guns on horseback. I think my favorite scene is where the turret of the cannon on one of the RTVs or whatever it's called, no, I can't remember what it's called. It's kind of like twisting, and you kind of get like a panoramic view as it moves down the main street, and it is really well shot, and the CGI in these films does step up a whole nother level. And there's literally just so much to talk about with these films, so I'll try and keep it brief. But it just steps up another level, and it's just excellent.
Yeah, I really enjoy that shot as well of the camera just like resting on the back of the tent. That's really impressive. And yeah, you kind of touched on the idea of Caesar like realizing that apes aren't all like they aren't all. It's not they're basically similar to humans in a sense, like because there's a duality to what humans are like, because you have people like Jason Clarke and his crew. They're genuinely concerned for the apes, and they're able to show compassion. They're not all about like weaponizing themselves. Where you got Gary Oldman, and his like cronies, they're all about arming themselves. They want to be ready for war when there doesn't necessarily have to be a war if you play it out correctly. So it kind of shows that there's imperfections within both the ape race, and for humans as well. And I like how Koba's he's kind of a figure that's similar to a lot of politicians that emerge today, particularly one guy in the White House, in terms of like believing that your cause is all that matters, and like you can sacrifice those on your own side in pursuing it, and you can manipulate your people into supporting you by like the way he kills Caesar and then blames it on the humans because he believes that's how it's like. Whether he has a point or not, he's still manipulating his own followers to serve his own message. And then he's silencing those who oppose him, like the ones who are in support of Caesar, like blocking them up. And he's doing it like he's all for the people. And part of it, I think, is like in service of his own ego and his own like selfish motivations. But that's what makes him such an interesting character. That he, like Matty said, like he's not necessarily just evil, because he at the start he generally is just concerned about what the humans are going to do to his people, because he's experienced the kind of callous nature that they can have. And then he obviously goes too far the other way. So very, very interesting character. But kind of mentioned Jason Clarke, who's the kind of leader of the scientists who come to try to get the power from the dam. And like, I think he's more suited to being like a foil for Caesar than James Franco, like, because he's just more like unassuming and just like a regular guy. Like he hasn't got like a big personality as an actor. Like he's always just kind of there doing a good job without distracting you too much. So I think it kind of works more than having someone who's as like charismatic and like demonstrative as James Franco. Mason, is that something you'd agree with? That he's kind of just better suited to slotting in there and being adding something a little different to Caesar's story?
Yeah, that's what I noticed like this time around. When I watched the second film, I realized how much more I preferred Jason Clarke's interactions with Caesar rather than thinking in the first film. I just, like you said, I think because he doesn't know as much, and he kind of learns a lot more from Caesar, whereas I feel like in the first film, James Franco is teaching Caesar more instead. So I feel like in this film, you see like Caesar is fully grown. He's like completely his own character now. And that's why I think their interactions they're more enjoyable. And I think like you said, they sort of feel more real as to how some of us probably would interact with Caesar ourselves, where he's, it's hard to explain. Like just immediately as I was watching it, I was like, he just immediately feels better suited compared to the James Franco character. But I guess it works to have such like a bubbly character in the first film, but then you have Jason Clarke's character in this film, where like the tone has changed, and it's really enjoyable to have a character who is on the side of the apes. Well, not even initially, he's probably not even on the side of the apes initially, but he's actually able to learn from the apes and understand sort of their cause and what they're fighting for. Whereas most other humans in these films just hate apes immediately, and like say blame the virus on them. So yeah, for me, it was a lot more enjoyable.
One thing I would like to talk about in this film is how they introduce a lot more apes, and they also build on the apes that they already have, and how distinguishable they make all of the different characters. I think in any other film, they'd be lazy with the CGI, or they just wouldn't put that much thought into it, and all the apes would be very, very difficult to like, discern from each other. And the fact they have like Koba, Lake, Cornelia, Caesar, Koba's little buddies as well, which are they all very distinctive. All the gorillas as well, Maurice, like Hugh and Ash, like, and yeah, they have a huge amount of apes here, and you can easily tell them all apart just by a glance, even by the movements. Like right away as well, they even help you out with it by having like Blue Eyes actually scratch through the chest with a bear, so you can tell who he is from the others, even though you don't need it because facially they are very different. And I think that's something they do really well compared to most films. And I think that's a really strong part of giving all these apes individuality in these films, because they all do have their own personalities. Like Rocket is very loyal to Caesar. He's not really going to come up with his own ideas, not because he's not smart, just because he knows Caesar and he trusts Caesar. Maurice is the one who knows how to guide Caesar. Rocket doesn't really trust humans, and his hate kind of takes over everything. Blue Eyes is kind of like swept along for the ride kind of thing, and it works beautifully. I know I said that too much, but it bloody works beautifully.
Yeah, I think that's where the quality of the direction comes in, and he continues that into the third film, where you don't let the like grand like set pieces and the visuals overwhelm the actual story. Like you still have like a poignant story at the center, and yeah, you're able to give all these different apes personality, and they're not just a bunch of CGI creatures. That's where like I feel it's really skilled from the director on that front. Okay, let's go around, get some ratings. Ross?
I gave it an 8.2.
Mason?
I gave it an 8.
Matty?
I gave it an 8.3.
I'll also give it an 8.3. Moving on to the final film in the trilogy, War for the Planet of the Apes, 2017. After the apes suffer unimaginable losses, Caesar wrestles with his darker instincts and begins his own mythic quest to avenge his kind. Directed by Reeves, who co-wrote the screenplay, first time he wrote one of the screenplays, with Baumbach, who was on the second film, starring Serkis, Woody Harrelson, and Steve Zahn. And once again, it was nominated for visual effects, and this was Matty's pick. Why'd you pick this film?
So this probably is my favorite of the films. It usually happens that the last one that came out is like your favorite just because it's the newest in your mind. But I think also this film, just first right out the bat, the visual effects are fucking insane. You can literally just see the fur on every ape, the water, the way the light reflects, and it literally looks stunningly real. Maurice especially, and the work they've done with Caesar as well is insane. So straight away, just that makes it so much stronger than the other two. You understand the other two had to lay the groundwork, but you see how far it's come, it's been fantastic. But just from a focal point of Caesar alone, you see him coming from the second film. He's been through like these 2-3 years of war. I'm not sure how long it's been. And he's become a lot more tougher, more calloused. He's come to the realization that apes are just as evil as humans. But now he's stuck with this war that he can't, kind of like, he didn't start it, but he's kind of having to be the big man and protect people as much as he can of his people, minimize losses to the humans, but at the same point he can't just roll over. So watching him grapple with this and also carry the guilt of killing Koba from the last film, and understanding that he sees a lot now of Koba in himself, and especially when he loses his family, this is kind of, he cannot let go of this, and he sees like the hate almost consume him. And you see at one point in the film, he admits that I am just like Koba, and I cannot forgive, I can't let go. And he's in this film, he's then matched again by another human counterpart, Woody Harrelson, who is absolutely fantastic in this film. And watching these two play off against each other is just beautiful to watch. I just love the fact that the kind of the irony as well of Woody Harrelson catching the disease. So when Caesar goes to kill him, Caesar then realizes he can't because it was never in him in the first place, and Woody Harrelson kills himself. It's a very nice resolution for Caesar not becoming the thing that he doesn't want to become. And it's nice that it's kind of a better message for the film as if he just went and murdered somebody. And the film really grips you as well, like the other ape dynamics, because you have Donkey, who has kind of like, he works for the humans now, and watching trying to him find his place in the world, and he really does get a nice ending by saving Caesar from Preacher by blowing him up with the grenade launcher, and then almost dying instantly. It's really that probably it's kind of also almost operatic, that moment, and it is really beautiful. And also as well with Winter, watching another big fucking gorilla get really scared of what's happening and betray his own kind, and his death scene as well is really quite moving. And they introduced Bad Ape as well, plays by, I think it's Steve Zahn, I think. Yeah, his performance is fantastic because he's got to play an ape that's come from almost living by himself and only learning from humans how to talk, so he doesn't know how to sign, so he's almost socially ruined compared to the other apes. And just watching his kind of performance that is just so far away from anything we've seen from any of the other apes, and it really does work excellently as well. Other things you could talk about, Nova as well, the girl, she takes like a kind of like a pivotal point in the film when Caesar kind of has to decide whether he's going to take him with him or not. And kind of it shows like the kindness that Maurice has. And she becomes quite important throughout the film as well. So it's nice having still human characters in the film, but now they're becoming at the mercy of the apes. And I think, yeah, that's mainly what I have to say about the film. I'll let you guys dig into like more of the nitty gritty of it, but very, very solid film.
Yeah, I agree. Like this kind of takes like development of Caesar's character to like new depths in terms of like his personal struggle that he's going through throughout this film. And because like, to an extent, I think he was like a bit overshadowed by Cobra and Dawn, and not massively, but like he had to share the limelight with him in terms of in terms of the story. But this is just Circus at his absolute best. Like I can't imagine he's done anything like as successful as this in terms of everything that he's able to get across, in terms of the emotional depth that he's having to convey through the prism of this CGI ape. Like kind of ridiculous what he's able to do. And like Matt said earlier, like he does need more recognition. Like he got like a kind of lifetime achievement award at the BAFTAs last year. But like I feel like kind of the work he's done and what other people in his field are able to do, it kind of needs more of like an actual like official award at the Oscars or anything else. So yeah, he is just ridiculous in film. And man, you also mentioned the donkeys. I find them fascinating. Like the idea that they're willing to sacrifice, I guess, their freedom and kind of lose any respect from the people they're around in order to save their lives. But like, is it really living? They're still like in amongst the war, but they're around people who don't give a shit about them. They're just kind of tools, and like the humans would sacrifice those apes at any point if they had to. There's kind of there's no affection there. So they're kind of really interesting. Ross, was that when obviously this is the first time you're watching the film, when you saw that there were apes on the human side? Because it comes in only like a couple minutes in when you enter this really well shot kind of war scene, and you see there's apes teaming up with the humans. Is that something that you found shocking?
Yeah, it was weird because you don't really expect it, but they make it make sense, which is really cool. And I think just, the idea that there are these donkeys that do kind of work for the humans, because either they serve Cobra or they don't agree with Caesar, it makes sense. And what I think they did well as well was like give them a resolution, give them an ending, kind of a redemption story. The gorilla killing the guy that shot Caesar, it gives an ending to them. It gives them like they had a purpose in the first place, but it gives them an ending and makes them realize that like they're apes, and the humans, they're that's how the humans see them as well. But yeah, this kind of putting them in there is a really good idea, actually, I think.
You know what I really like when I'm watching films is when you're watching one film and it kind of reminds you of other stuff. And then you read about it and it's like, oh, they actually were inspired by another film. Because when I'm watching it this time, I was like, Woody Harrelson reminds me of Colonel Kurtz, which is Marlon Brando's character in Apocalypse Now, in terms of this like rogue general who's kind of a bit unhinged and very like single-minded in his like approach to his cause. Like he's like, no, we're going to wipe out all of these people who pose a threat to humankind. This is how it's going to be. And then like Harrelson actually confirmed like that was kind of like a motivation, and that was how he was kind of trying to get that performance across. He was using Colonel Kurtz. So yeah, really enjoy that when we're watching the film. It's like, oh yeah, they actually were inspired by that. And there's other films as well that you see in this, like The Great Escape, when the apes are plotting their way of getting out of the quarantine camp, and like the music as well is kind of similar to that, to the famous Great Escape song. So that's all stuff that I really enjoy about it. But I think it's interesting that this film did not do as well as the previous two. And to an extent, I understand, because the stuff that I enjoy about the film, you can imagine like mainstream audiences wouldn't be as like receptive to, because it's a far more like gritty, almost like lugubrious tone at times. It's a much slower pace. And that's probably alienated a lot of people who wanted this like kind of big action epic with all these apes to kind of round off the series, because it made like 300 million less. It's like it's a compelling story, like, and there's enough action in there to keep you entertained. But Mason, did you find the slower pace and the kind of more serious tone to be something that was kind of off-putting about the film for you?
No, not at all. I think it's something that I enjoy like the most about this film. Like I said, is that added emotion that you see in so many scenes sort of throughout the film, that I think the other two films have those, just not as much as this film does. Like for some reason, this film just seems to sort of like slap differently, to where I feel like every half hour I'm getting like really like deep moments in this film, but they don't feel like they're just put there to try and like show some emotion to like to us as the audience. Like they're essential. Like every single scene is there for a reason, I feel like. So yeah, I think that sort of darker tone is what makes this film probably it makes this film my favorite out of the three, because instead of sort of just being like an action film, like I said, it plays its purpose as the last film for a trilogy and rounds off so many characters. And yeah, like you said, at the same time, just offers us as the audience, I feel like what we want from this film as well is that added emotion. And I think the film gives us that in the final one of the trilogy.
I'm going to be honest, I'm not a massive fan of Bad Ape. Like, I just kind of watching it. This is the second time I watched it. It's still kind of find him annoying, like, because it is a very, very harsh film tonally, and he's kind of there to kind of alleviate that every now and then with a bit of humor. But I don't know, maybe I just didn't really need it. Maybe he was kind of meant to be that bridge for people who weren't coming expecting to see such a serious film, having that element of like a more sillier, like he's still got a very deep backstory, but like a sillier, more humorous character that they thought that was kind of like integral to getting this story across. But yeah, personally, I find him a bit annoying. But the ending to this trilogy is like really affecting. Like Maurice speaking, I think it's pretty sure it's for the first time. Like maybe he said like the odd word or two, but like having like a full-on conversation in English for the first time. And you have like Caesar. I love how it's like a kind of, you have like, it's like at sunrise and there's all that greenery, there's the water, and Caesar's kind of like basking in the sun, reflecting on everything he's accomplished to get his kind to this stage where they kind of live in a somewhat of like a paradise away from the threat of humans and the threat of war. And it kind of just brings an end to like one of the great like movie protagonists, I think, in the like last decade, maybe even like further on. Matt, is that something that you can subscribe to, like the work they do with Caesar over these three films? And considering he's just an ape, but the depths they're able to plunge with that character and the work that the directors, the writers, Andy Serkis has done. Like, he really is like an iconic like lead for a movie.
I think you're right about the ending they've given him, and I like the fact that they've done the trilogy. They've given him the beginning, the middle, and the end, and now the character can't be tampered with anymore. The works now stands for itself, and he's dead. So now they can't bring him back. If they want a sequel, he's not going to be in it, which is good. So I feel like now it stands as a whole, and they've really got everything they can out of the character, and not even overworked the character either. Like, everything has been completely believable, and really quite moving. Like the love you have for just one character who's just an ape at the end of the day, like it is beautiful. But I think I really do hope they do revisit this. I think in terms, I want them to almost then catch up with the Planet of the Apes that you know from, I can't remember the year, but the really old first ones. So I would like to see, say, these apes 300 years from now, when they're they've basically picked up everything, all they've learned from what's left over from the humans, and they've almost eradicated kind of human culture to the point where they said that apes have always been here. Apes are the things that are the best. Caesar is kind of like their icon kind of thing, the person that led them out of whatever the Dark Ages or whatever they would call it. And they'd be wearing clothes, they'd almost be militarized, and there'd be different subgroups of, like, because I think in the old films, like, the gorillas were on a different kind of like society to the apes, and then there were these different struggles again. And I'd love to see this happen with this trilogy. I don't know if they'll do it now, but that's something I think they really should pursue. Something you said about Bad Ape, I don't think he was put there as like comedic relief. I think, sorry, my pizza's ready. I don't think Bad Ape's been put there as comedic relief, just because I think some people are funny, and I think in the same way some apes are just funny. And apes themselves, they are curious, funny little creatures. I think some of them. And he does have deep moments, and he does manage to tap into those like insecurities and the vulnerability that he needs to. And at the same time, he's also kind of like a funny character to work with. And I don't think they try to trivialize the film in any way just by making a bit of slapstick. I think it's funny in the same way that real life can be funny, rather than making it a comedy, if that makes any sense. And I think he didn't do anything that was out of character, because his upbringing is just so different to all other apes that we've seen so far. As someone who's been raised in a zoo, mainly around people, and him being the smaller of many apes, I think, and him being alone as well for a long time. So I don't think like is warranted to say that he's just put there for slapstick. But yeah, I get it if you don't like it, because his performance is a little bit further afield than the others.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that with the film that I kind of question. Like, I mean, this is tiny, but I think there's a massive gorilla on top of a horse. It's just start a thing. Like, a horse would definitely not be able to carry a gorilla. But we'll brush over that. I think throughout the whole film, throughout the whole trilogy mainly, but definitely in this film, Caesar has massive plot armor, and there's literally trained soldiers missing their shots at him. They're like all around him, like a stormtrooper would. He gets literally the whole base that he's in, the army base, explodes, kills everyone in the base apart from him. And then him escaping the avalanche as well, even though he was right by the humans. Yeah, I mean, he managed to climb the tree, but I think as well with the film, that avalanche is kind of just convenient there to kill the humans. It just kind of happens. There's some things that, I mean, it's still a brilliant film. Like, the trilogy as a whole, like, I feel like I've been on this journey with Caesar, and you finish the end film where obviously it's got that really nice ending with Maurice and Caesar. I feel like I've been on this journey with Caesar, and it feels like ages ago since I heard him say no and Caesar is home, and now he can fully talk, and it's like no. It's like a gradual thing, and yeah, I'm so glad we picked this, because I probably wouldn't have watched this trilogy if it wasn't on the podcast, and I'm glad I did though, because it's been a nice surprise.
Okay, let's get some ratings. Start with you, Matthew.
Matthew. Okay. I gave it an 8.5.
Ross,
I gave it an 8.2.
Masonry.
Yeah, I gave it an 8.2 as well.
I'll give it an 8.4. Okay. I'm going to hand over to Ross for our ratings roundup. Ratings roundup.
So, in terms of the order of the films this week, they just go backwards. So the newest one is the best one. So we've got Rise of the Planet of the Apes third, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes in second, and War for the Planet of the Apes in first. In terms of the overall rankings, Rise comes quite low. It's out of 67 films, it's 59th, which doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. I mean, it's surrounded by films like Howl's Moving Castle and Shutter Island and stuff. So we haven't watched some very good films on this, so its low ranking doesn't mean it's bad at all. Dawn moves up to 30th, on par with Ferris Bueller's Day Off, The Lighthouse, and Spirited Away. All got the same rating at 8.2. And with an 8.3, War moves up to 16th, on par with American Beauty, Hereditary, and Before Sunrise.
Fascinating stuff. Okay. Moving on to the unique category for this week's our favorite ape. Matty?
Okay, so my favorite ape isn't necessarily because of his part in the film, because my favorite ape is Rocket. He's one of the least spoken apes. He's a fucking unit, mind. Dude's jacked, but mainly because he's played by Terry Notary, who has been really instrumental to making these films, because he's an actor mainly, but he's also a stunt double and a movement coach. And he's worked on what used to be in the Cirque du Soleil. Cirque du Soleil? Cirque? Someone help me out here. How do I fucking say this?
Cirque du Soleil.
That's the fucking one. Anyway, he was in that, and that's like really good at like jumping and shit or whatever. I don't know. But basically, if you like a film in the last 10 years or last 20 years, he's probably worked on it. I'll just give a little list. Like Avengers Endgame and Infinity, Thor Love and Thunder, Call of the Wild, Lion King, Kong Skull Island, The Hobbit, Warcraft, Attack the Block, Avatar, Superman, Tarzan, Incredible Hulk, Fantastic Four, and the original, the Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes. So if you liked a film that's used like motion capture, CGI, stunt doubles, he's got like a bigger filmography than this. Is just at the top bit. He's worked on it, and he is really quite fantastic. He's worked with all the other actors in this film, in the last 3 films, to help them move more like apes. He spent time working with apes, and he's someone who really doesn't get like enough credit for what he brings to these films. And obviously, yeah, like Andy Serkis as well, as like them two working together as like dream team. But I just think he just doesn't get like the love that he needs to, because he's really quite fantastic.
Beat that, Mason.
I think my favorite ape is Maurice. I think like the detail on him is really sick. Yeah, I think the detail on his face is really sick, but equally he offers like that sort of voice of reasoning to Caesar. I feel like when I was younger, I feel like I really rated is he an orangutan? I think he's an orangutan. So yeah, it's kind of like a little throwback for me. So seeing one like being very realistic, I was like, we move. I'm going for Maurice.
Ross?
So I don't know if he was in Cirque du Soleil, but I also went for Maurice. I think we let him slip under the radar quite a lot for his podcast about how like pivotal a character he was. But yeah, I mean, such a wise ape. Always got a cool head. And like, I think what makes you love him more is how like he adopted Nova just because he knew he couldn't leave her. Like, he's even got this kind of emotion for a human child. And Caesar said, don't take her. He took her anyway off his own back. And yeah, he's just the nicest guy ever. And even without talking, you love him. And I think I want Maurice to be my mate. He's just a great guy.
You know who else is a great guy? Koba. He's my favorite ape. for the complexity of his character, and also it didn't really talk about like the design of the character in terms of like the little details to make him look so ominous, like the scar over his eye, all of those little details. Kind of makes you wonder in the first film how they weren't concerned by him just from his appearance that he was probably going to be the one to attack them at some point. Yeah. Do you want to do an actor of the week? I feel like it's just Andy Serkis, so like you've talked about it. Yeah.
After 3, she will say Andy Serkis.
Okay. May's not there.
Oh, for fuck's sake, May.
For fuck's sake.
Oh.
Okay. Actor of the week is 3, 2, 1. Andy Serkis.
Yeah, Steve Zahn.
And Andy Serkis.
The Irishness was a pop vinyl award. Ross?
I mean, there's already a Maurice and a Caesar one, but I think I'd say this anyway. I think Koba, he just looks sick, like with his manky eye and all his scars and stuff, and just like with his war paint on and stuff. Yeah, it just looks sick. So I think I'd have to go for Koba. It doesn't really, not like a particular scene, just one of Koba.
Of course, it's Koba. And that will do us for this week. Follow me on Twitter at LeonWait98, creditsinmypodcast.wordpress.com. We're on Spotify, Google, Stitcher, Podbean. Next week, doing 70s horror to Matty's delight. Alien, Carrie, and The Wicker Man. Until then, go well.
Cheers.
Human lies!
Where's Caesar? Need Caesar! Caesar!